Greetings one and all. Super Thursdays here in the Holy Land, Holy Apple, and the Holy Hilltop. Tal Binyamin, we are on the 16th day of the month of Sivan 5781. Pray that everybody is safe and doing well. Just want to say that I'm really happy to be here today. I hitched in from where I live in Elon Moreh, and I got a ride in a really small car, and there was almost no windows open, and there was no air conditioner going on in the car, and it's really a grill kind of day today. It's like, who knows, God, in the 90s or something. And you know, this woman, almost no windows, a little crack of a window, and that's it. And I got in with a friend of mine, and she's looking back in the back seat as she's driving, you know, and God, I better say the prayer for traveling real quick, because I don't know, I hope I really get there today. You know, she's looking in the back, towards the back. I've never seen that. You know, usually you talk as a driver, you just talk the way you're sitting. But every so often, you know, she would have to get back onto the road, so we wouldn't fly off the road. And then I finally realized why it was so hot in that car, and I couldn't take it, and I was sweating it out. She had an umbrella in the car, so maybe she thought that it was going to rain or snow. Of course, it doesn't do that in Israel for 6 or 7 months of the year. And then she missed the speed bump in Hawara. We went like flying in the air. So I'm really happy to be here. Okay, with God's help, an extremely, extremely important class. Share it, get it out, get the word out. You know, it really hurts me. I see some Jew haters out there. They have 30,000 people, 100,000 people watching the Jew haters. And unfortunately for us, you know, we have a couple hundred. So there's something really wrong over here. The shoe is on the opposite foot. Today's class, with God's help, will be a two-parter. I cannot stress the importance of it. Get the message out. Israel-Hamas War 2021. Beginning of Gog and Magog? Question mark. Who won? Question mark. Okay, so put on your seatbelts. Really, really important stuff. Take note. The last class that I gave was about the Miron tragedy. Go back, check it out. I'll try to put the link on in the comments section to that class. One of the points that were mentioned there was, of course, the Khatam Sofer. Khatam Sofer wrote a few times in his various books that the reason why there was a tremendous earthquake that flattened Safed and the north was in 1837 was due to the fact that we ignored Jerusalem. We did not put Jerusalem on the top of our pedestal, and therefore we were punished. He's talking about, the Khatam Sofer was speaking about going up to Miron, that we've we've made it a kind of like a new holiday that has taken precedence over the holidays when we went up to Jerusalem. So that's the Khatam Sofer's take. The reason why we suffered that tremendous, it killed all the inhabitants, destroyed the homes, because of the fact that we did not put in first place of importance Jerusalem. I also quoted in that class Rabbis Ariel and Rabbi Lior, and they also not quoting the Chatam Sofer, but saying that we've turned a custom going up to Meron on Lag BaOmer into something much greater than the law, the letter of the law, going up to Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the Arabs that are up there. We've gotten our priorities wrong, and that's why that's why we suffered the tremendous loss of 45 holy souls in Meron. Now, you can't make this up, but folks, this is really amazing. Thinking about that, we've seen tremendous tragedies here. Recently, we saw Meron, 45 Jews. We saw in Givat Ze'ev, 2 Jews killed, hundreds injured. We've seen in Italy grandparents and their kids, and their 2 kids killed when one of these cable cars in the air fell down in Italy. And of course, the most recent, the Arab-Israel war for 11 days that took place. Okay, now, what's the connection? This is really, really amazing. As I said, you can't make it up. We see this whole battle, this whole war, the major point, centerpiece, is Jerusalem. That's the main focus. We see all over the world, marching, the world, all countries marching against Israel and against the Jewish presence in Jerusalem. And we see that the enemies of Israel, they called this war the sword of Jerusalem. So, how many wake-up calls do we need to see that this is the crux issue here? Jerusalem. Putting it on front burner. Not only that, this war began on Jerusalem Day, 28th of Iyar. That's why the Jews call this operation or this war, it's called Guardians of the Wall. What walls are they talking about? The walls of the old city. Because that is the day that the war began. So that's also really amazing. Unfortunately, if you listen to names of various operations or wars between Jews and Arabs, you'll see a tremendous difference. And that is why we are losing. Everything that we touch is always some kind of defensive mechanism. It's called like the IDF, the Israel Defense Force. We don't have like an offense, it's like a defense. And we have all these wars in Gaza in the last 15 years. Summer rain, pillar of clouds, like very, very peaceful sounding names. And you have the Arabs, the sword of Jerusalem. Or you look, they have rockets, and we have Iron Dome. Iron Dome is a defense, and they have the rockets, which is the offense. And this is one of the reasons why we are suffering, because the best defense is an offense. And when you're in these wars in the Middle East, you have to understand that we're dealing with different kinds of populations here. This ain't the Middle West. This ain't the Midwest. Okay, so remembering that, let us progress. Center of attention, focus, Jerusalem. World protesting against Jewish presence in Jerusalem. Of course, we also have the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood that is the focus of the world. This is one of the issues that brought about this attack by the Hamas and the Arabs in Israel. So we have the Al-Aqsa, the mosque, we have Jerusalem, and we have Sheikh Jarrah, a neighborhood in Jerusalem. Everything is surrounded by surrounding Jerusalem, and we have the world up in arms against Jews, against Jerusalem, and this might sound familiar, the War of Armageddon, Gog&Magog. Okay, first point. We have to thank God. Amazing miracle is that this war that was fought for 11 days, it was fought on only one front. Very easily, we could have been attacked in 2 or 3 different fronts. Let's take, for example, the north. The north, there's something like 330,000 rockets that are pointed to Israel. Could have been Iran. In the east, could have been Jordan. So we have to, number one, always thank God that we were able to fight on one front. Perhaps it's a wake-up call for God, saying, listen, this time it was one front, let's wake up, let's smell the coffee. Because it could have been different. And God forbid, could be different, another round of this. Next point. Let's get into the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. This is a very, very disputed point between Jews and Arabs. So let's get our facts straight. It's good to be knowledgeable always. So here's the history of the neighborhood. Number one, in 1867, Jews buy land from Muslims in Sheikh Jarrah. At the edge of the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood lie 2 Jewish neighborhoods. One, Simon the Righteous, Shimon HaTzadik. The next one is Nachlat Shimon, the inheritance of Simon. Today, just for your knowledge, for your information, all these 2 Jewish neighborhoods are considered to be part of Sheikh Jarrah. It's all considered to be one. So even though it's really at the edge of the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, today it's considered to be Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Okay, Simon the Righteous, Shimon HaTzadik, he lived in 310 BCE, or Jewish time, the year 3450. So he is buried in that area, and also the small tribunal court, the Sanhedrin Aktana, are also buried in this very special and holy place. These 2 areas were bought in the year 1875 by 2 groups, one called the Sephardic Agency and the other group called Knesset Israel. So once again, 1867, Jews bought property from Arabs in Sheikh Jarrah, and 8 years later, Jews bought up property in this area where the burial place of Shimon HaTzadik and the tribunal court. In 1890, 15 years later, 6 homes were built for poor Jewish families in the Shimon HaTzadik area. In the beginning of the 1900s, dozens of families moved into the Nachalat Shimon neighborhood. Hundreds of Jews lived in this area. Okay, so we're getting a true picture here of what the Arabs don't want you to know. But we're not going to be ignorant. During the riots of 1936 by the Arabs against the Jews in Israel, Jews ran for their lives, left these neighborhoods out of fear. They would return only months later, 1936. War of Independence in 1948. These 2 neighborhoods suffered greatly at the hands of their Arab neighbors from Sheikh Jarrah. For example, January 7th, 1948, 3 Jews were killed and others injured in this neighborhood. March 12th, 1948, British command Jews to flee neighborhood for fear for their lives. Once again, in 1936, Jews had to flee for some months, and in 1948, the British command Jews to leave the neighborhood for fear of their lives. April 13th, 1948, 78 Jews killed on their way to Hadassah Hospital, Mount Scopus, doctors, professors, nurses, you got it. 78 Jews killed in Sheikh Jarrah. That came April 13th, was before Passover. During the intermediate days of Passover that year, 1948, the area was taken again by the Palmach soldiers, by Jewish soldiers, only to have the Jews, the soldiers, leave shortly after that. Why? They were promised by the British that as soon as their mission, the British mission, they needed to have that area in Sheikh Jarrah, they needed it to be free. But as soon as they don't need it anymore, they would inform the Jews, and the Jews would return to the neighborhoods, to their homes that they bought and lived for already, it was over 48 years. But of course, that never happened, and instead of the Jews being informed, the Arabs were informed, and they moved in. Jordan settles Arabs in these neighborhoods in 1954. Okay, Jordan, illegally settled, Jordan who itself is illegal. I'm not going to get into that right now, but look it up. Jordan, the illegal country, they settle Arabs in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, of Shimon HaTzadik and Nachalat Shimon, in Jewish homes. Of course, 1967, this we're talking about the east side of Jerusalem. This was liberated by the Jewish people in 1967. 5 years later, in 1972, Israel courts hand over the rights to these neighborhoods to their proper owners, the Sephardic Agency and Knesset Israel. 1982, 10 years later, these 2 Jewish agencies appeal to the courts to immediately resettle 17 homes. That was in 1982. Courts made a compromise. The Arabs would remain as squatters, but recognize Jewish ownership of the land and pay some kind of rent. It was a quarter of the going rate of Jerusalem apartments at that time. Amazing. So they just had to recognize the Jewish right to ownership of their homes, and they had to pay a quarter of the going rent and not do damage or build on to these homes that were legally were owned by Jews. In 1993, there were, of course, the Oslo Accords. PLO moves in, and they urge all the Arabs not to pay rent. Once again, we're talking about a quarter of the rent. It's a pretty good deal. You're in the center of Jerusalem, not bad, but that's what they urged. So 1993. And the Arabs until this day have not paid any rent. We're talking about over 25 years, no rent. Think about if you had tenants that have not paid the rent for 25 years, where would you be? Actually, where would they be? And they would be out of your house a long time ago. You would kick them, you know where. In 1998, the court rules that the Arab tenants must pay, yet they continue to refuse. Some of the Arab trespassers are removed, their homes returning to their lawful owners, the Jews. That was in 1998. Fast forwarded 22, 3 years, end of 2020, beginning of 2021, the court orders eviction of 6 Arab families in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood that have been illegally squatting for decades in these Jewish homes and not living up to the agreement that they would be allowed to remain as squatter rights, but they would have to pay us some kind of rent and keep it up and not add on. So that's the history of a neighborhood in Jerusalem, a Jewish neighborhood in Israel, bought by Jews over 100 years ago, 140 years ago. Now think about the poor Arabs being evicted from Jewish homes. Okay. When we think about this Jerusalem neighborhood, and we think about this being one of the centers of the explosion of this war that we experienced, we have to realize a few things. Number one, this is a trivia question. How many times does it say in the Quran, does it mention Jerusalem? Think about it hard. Take out your calculators. Okay, here's the answer. I'm going to make it really easy today. 0, baby. 0 times. How many times is Jerusalem mentioned in the Jewish Tanakh? 669 times. Got that? 669 times. More so, the war, the sword of Jerusalem, we're talking about Jerusalem, we're talking about Sheikh Jarrah, we're talking about Al-Aqsa. Where is the Al-Aqsa Dome? Say Yehudah, everybody knows where it is. I mean, it's in Jerusalem, right next to the Kotel, next to the wall. Well, think again, because there are many, many scholars and professors that tell us amazing things. So, not only Jewish ones, but this is pretty convincing. So listen closely, and once again take notes. We have to get the message out. What's really happening here? Okay, this is by Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Early Islamic sources state that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, literally meaning the further mosque, mentioned only once in the Quran, was one of 2 mosques located near Jarana, near Saudi Arabia. One of the mosques was called the Closer Mosque, and the other one was called, the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, because it was further away. When the Quran refers to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, while telling the myth of the Prophet Muhammad's nighttime journey from the Holy Mosque of Mecca to Al-Aqsa, that is, talking about the further mosque in Jarana. Listen closely. In 682 CE, 50 years after Muhammad's death, Abd Allah ibn al-Zubayr, the tough man of Mecca, rebelled against the Umayyads who ruled Damascus and would not allow them to fulfill the Hajj. They're going up to the pilgrimage in Mecca. Since the Hajj, pilgrimage, is one of the 5 basic Islamic commandments, they were forced to choose Jerusalem as their alternative for pilgrimage site. In order to justify choosing Jerusalem, the Umayyads of Damascus rewrote the story told in the Quran, moving the Al-Aqsa Mosque to Jerusalem and adding for good measure the myth of the nighttime journey of Muhammad to Al-Aqsa. This is the reason the Sunni Muslims now consider Jerusalem the 3rd holiest city. Now think about this. Even if it was correct that what we know in Jerusalem is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is not, and we'll see as we're beginning to learn now. But it's the 3rd holiest. You see when they pray, their backsides are towards Jerusalem, towards the Temple Mount. Okay, they're praying towards Mecca. Not only that, think about the Olympics. Think about the different playoffs, the finals, baseball, basketball, whatever sport you'd like to. Remember the 3rd team, that received the bronze medal? We don't remember any of that. We remember the gold medal. Shia Islam mercilessly persecuted by the Umayyad Caliphate did not accept the holy Jerusalem canard. They didn't buy it, which is the reason why the 2nd holiest city to the Shiites is Najif in Iraq, the burial place of the Shiite founder Ali bin Abi Talib. Many of the Shiite elders, Iranian Hezbollah, only began to call Jerusalem holy after the Khomeini rebellion in 1979 in Iran, so as to keep the Sunnis from accusing them to be soft on Zionism. They didn't want to think the Shiite Muslims wanted to make sure that the Sunni Muslims wouldn't accuse them of being Zionists, that we don't have any claim on Jerusalem. So they wanted to make sure. So that has changed via the Shiites. The entire area of the Temple Mount is known as El Haram El Sharif, the holy and noble site. But a change came about after the 6-day war, when Jewish voices were heard, particularly the chief rabbi of Haifa, Rabbi Shar Yeshuva Cohen, and the chief rabbi of the IDF, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, calling for the establishment of a synagogue on the Mount. It was felt that the Muslims would not object, since Al-Aqsa was on the southern edge of the compound and the synagogue would not be nearby. What we're talking about here, folks, is that the Dome of the Golden Rock, that was never called Al-Aqsa. The Al-Aqsa that was falsely called Al-Aqsa, but it was south of the Gold Rock, the Gold Dome. It's south in the mosque where they pray. They don't pray in the Dome of the Gold Rock. As a result, however, the Muslims decided to announce that Al-Aqsa, mentioned in the Quran, refers not only to the mosque on the southern end of the compound, but is the name for the entire Temple Mount zone, abandoning the original name, El Haram El Sharif. My colleague, Professor Yitzchak Richter, discusses this issue at length in his book, From Mecca to Jerusalem and Back, put it out in 2005. The renaming of the Temple Mount to be called Al-Aqsa is clearly a canard with 2 documents, one known and one less known, revealing the truth. Listen to this, this is really amazing. In 1924, the notorious, may his name be erased, the Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin El-Husseini, Machshemo, in 1924 put out a booklet about El Haram Sharif, the holy and the noble place. there is no mention there. Okay, there is no mention there of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's only El-Haram Sharif. Not only that, if you look on a Jordan tourist map and a pamphlet from 1965, you'll see the same thing, that there was no mosque that was Al-Aqsa was not, what they claim today to be Al-Aqsa was not there at all. So this is a pretty amazing piece of information to understand. This past Friday, 5 days ago, 6 days ago, we had an amazing event on the Temple Mount. 80,000 Arabs, amazingly, 80,000 Arabs went out to demonstrate, came to demonstrate in the temple, on the Temple Mount, and there the person, the sheikh that speaks, gives the sermon, the Friday sermon, he was attacked literally with rocks and bottles. It's amazing. You can see it, check it out. Why? Because he refused to, in his speech, in his sermon, he refused to talk about the Hamas and all of the good that they did in the past war, past 11 days of the war. So you could see it. There's inner fighting over there going on. Next, you see thousands, tens of thousands of people yelling, "Send our regards to the El Qassam brigades in Gaza." And we see for the first time Arabs, tens of thousands of Arabs waving green Hamas flags, police not intervening. For the first time we see Arabs in Israel not afraid to openly show support for the Hamas organization, for the Hamas terrorist organization. The PLO is also a terrorist organization. But this is a new stage in the war. So remember those things. They're really amazing. 1924, the Mufti himself saying that the whole area we know today of the Temple Mount, of the Dome of the Golden Rock, that was called El-Haram Sharif, and only on the southern side of the Temple Mount, that was what they called El-Aqsa, even though now we know that the El-Aqsa story, being in Jerusalem, and the flying flying of Muhammad in the middle of the night, this is all 50 years after Muhammad passed away. So we have an amazing thing. Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran, and this El-Aqsa is mentioned one time in the Quran, and it's mentioned that Muhammad visited this place and he went to the mosque further away. That was the Al-Aqsa Mosque located in Saudi Arabia. Next, we've seen over the last 2 weeks, amazing, all over Israel. I can't even think of a place that we didn't see it. We see the Arabs of Israel, what they call Israeli Arabs, God forbid. Israel is people of God, is the Jewish people, Israel. We see Arabs all over Israel rioting and revolting. And, on one hand, it's really, really frightening, of course, and they're pulling out their weapons, thousands and thousands of weapons that they've had stored up over all these years. On the other hand, this could very well be a tremendous godsend. People see the average Joe all over the world, the average Israeli or the average Jew in the world, they see who the Arabs are. They thought there was coexistence. And they see now the reality. There ain't no coexistence. And they see the danger of this fifth column in the midst of the Jewish people. So we hear a lot of regular people waking up. I was listening to a program on the internet, and the host of the program, it's a woman and a man, so the man says, I want to tell you, I live next to an Arab town, whatever the name was, and I go there all the time to buy fruits and vegetables, and I go there all the time to buy meat at a certain butcher over there. And I want to tell you that at least for the next year, I am not going to give them one dime, one shekel. They are not going to get from me. It's the least I could do to protest what I've seen with my own eyes. And then the woman host, she says, I want to tell you that I have right now, they're about to start in my house a refurbishing of certain parts of my house. And I called up the manager of the building manager, and I told him, listen, no Arabs, only Jews. And I'm willing to pay more money that they bring me only Jews. These people are not religious. These people are not religious. And this is an example of hundreds and hundreds of such people that it was a tremendous. They're making changes in their lives to no longer support and go to these stores in these Arab towns in the middle of Israel. So we pray that this will be a definite change in the way that the average Israeli looks at the Arabs living in the land of Israel, to understand who we're dealing with here. The downside of this, there's a lot of downsides to this, but one that we might not notice. There was a general strike. Last Tuesday, there was a general strike. It was really amazing. I happened to be in Jerusalem that day. You could almost go to sleep on the roads. People were afraid to travel the roads. There was a general strike all over Israel, and it was pretty much all kept. And we have to understand, I had to take my car in. To be in Israel, there's a test. You have to pass once a year. They test your car to see if it's okay, if it's in good shape. And I went in and I needed to fix a few things. So I said, oh, I know that there's a garage right next to this testing place that it belongs to people that live in the settlement, the Jewish settlement of Beit El in Benjamin. So, well, great. So I went there. And I asked them if they could do these repairs that I need to make in order for me to pass the test again, retest. And they said, we can't do it today. I said, why not? They said, we don't have any workers there. What do you mean you don't have any workers there? I was under the impression that it was only Jewish laborers. Okay, so it turns out that the owners are from Beit El, from the settlement, but the workers are all Arabs, and none of them show up to work. So folks, unfortunately, over the last 70 years, we have become subservient to the Arabs. Too many Jews refuse to work, and all the jobs are being grabbed by the Arabs, and the Jews are held at ransom. There's nothing that they could do. They don't have a choice. My son-in-law works, he owns a restaurant in the middle of Israel, center of Israel, and right next to his restaurant is a gigantic supermarket called Supersol. And all the workers there are Arabs. And for this one-day strike, they had to close, they couldn't open up their supermarket. And he says, listen, it's an embarrassment. I'd like to fire them all. But what could I do? I don't have Jewish laborers. This is terrible. We have become subservient to the Arabs. We are in their hands. If they choose to strike, What are we going to do? Our economy comes to a halt. This must stop. Jews must be willing to get off of welfare and start working. And this is an ideal. This is ideology. Even though maybe you won't get paid, but look at it as being a patriot to your country. Look at it as something we must do. We must get back to the labor force. Okay. The next part is during these riots all over the land of Israel, we were all asking, where are the police? Where are the soldiers? Where are the border police soldiers? Where are various government officials that are responsible for security? They're nowhere to be found. They're nowhere to be found. There are two options that I see. Either from grassroots, the people in Israel, the Jewish people in Israel, will force the army, the police, and the rest to protect Jews. They won't have a choice. They will be a catalyst in forcing these units, organizations into action. Or people will take action by themselves. This past war, over 200 Jews had their guns confiscated. If you could believe this insanity, 200 Jews had their weapons confiscated by the police because they came to protect Jews all over Israel, in Haifa, in Acre, in Lod, in Ramle, and the beat goes on all over the Israel. Can you imagine that? Disgusting, despicable. This last option of the people rising up, the Jews, this was a beautiful scene. We talked about, in our last video about Meron, that this was a wake-up call also on the issue of love of Jews instead of hatred of Jews, of fellow Jews. And needless hatred, we have to go and demonstrate a love of Jews. So thousands and tens of thousands of Jews, of simple people, woke up and went out to protect all over from Israel, not just the settlers, from all over Israel. People went out and to protect Jewish homes, Jewish stores, and Jewish people in the land of Israel. Let me tell you something despicable also. This past week, 2 days ago, there was a Channel 11 news clip, a news interview with various residents of the neighborhood of Lod, where they burned twice the synagogue there, and they burned Jewish books, and they burned Torah scrolls. So they're interviewing, and they have the Jewish residents of Lod. Lod is a mixed, what they call a mixed city. There's Arabs and also Jews that live there. And these types of mixed cities became death traps for the Jews that are living there. Literally death traps. So they have formed, the Jews of Lod have formed their own security organization. And they're being interviewed, and they're saying what happened these past 2 weeks in Lod is nothing new. It's been going on for a couple of years. Can you imagine this? It's kept a secret. It's not being publicized. And he goes from house to house, and he shows bullet holes that the Arabs have been shooting in the last couple of years. And nothing is being done. He he tapes a phone call to the Israel police, and he says, listen, the Arabs are doing ABC. Listen, that's the way it is in Lod. That is the answer. That is a police answer. Can you, check your ears for wax, but you're hearing it correct. You hear the police on the other side. Hey, man, this is Lod. That's how things roll. That's how things roll. Are you the police? You're a joke. So, it's either one of these two options. To force the authorities to do their jobs. That, of course, would be the best. They're supposed to be protecting Jews. IDF, no. Police, border. Their job is to protect Jews. They're not the UN. They're protecting Jews. That's their job. Okay, so we're going to call it a class here. God willing, next week we shall continue into part 2.